Well. I guess the debate is finally settled. The long-heated debate at whether to which Mitchell Trubisky or Deshaun Watson is the better quarterback has finally been set in stone. Mitchell Trubisky absolutely dealing on the Texans. They go ahead and they win. What was it, like 37-7? I mean, it's pretty obvious, Reese. It's pretty obvious.
Yeah, I mean, clearly Mitch was, he really asserted his dominance today in the game, really providing the most explosive plays on offense, really handed that ball off nicely to Montgomery to really break out and start the game on the right note. But in all seriousness, he did what he needed to do. And, he looked pretty good. He executed, right? His completion percentage was pretty good. Like we were just talking about before we started recording here, they never really let him air the ball out too much. There weren't really too many impressive throws, but he did, that one he snuck to Allen Robinson on the goal line was kind of a tighter window. He made some decent throws, and it was definitely more than enough to win this game, especially with the level of the defense was playing at today, putting them in some very beneficial positions.
While I said in the podcast that I did think they'd win because I think the Chicago Bears are going to ruin whatever comes to them, and the fact that we could have a good draft position, I feel like they're going to ruin by picking up probably one last game with the Jaguars as well. But overall, what I was going to say really when it comes down to it is that, Mitch has done a lot better than Foles. And I think that's my biggest takeaway from this game is that if Mitch started the entire season, I think we'd be in a much different position. I think we pick up probably the Saints game, probably the Titans game. Like, I think a good 2 or 3 games that week that we lost, I think we end up winning because of Mitchell Trubisky. And at the end of the day, I can't be all that upset because, while they did lose those games, I mean, Mitch isn't a good long-term answer. And the fact that we are able to move on, I think is somewhat of a blessing.
Yeah, and it's a very kind of like bittersweet game, because it was good to break the losing streak. I mean, that just wasn't good to see, and of course it feels good to finally, win a game again. But at the same time, that, it kind of probably or could potentially hurt this team's draft position in the upcoming draft, and maybe they're doing more harm than good. And like you said, I mean, I think, possibly playing with momentum here. I mean, this following game going up to Minnesota, I mean, to me, it looks a lot more competitive just because after a game like this and where this team's been at, you have to feel like they're going to feed off of some of this momentum, at least early on in that game. I don't know if it'll be sustained. Not saying the Bears will go to Minnesota and win, but you have to feel that at least they'll come out with some kind of confidence that they haven't had the past, 3-4 weeks ever since they really started this slide. So, I think that, it was very nice to see that, but at the same time, what are the long-term ramifications? And it is good that, we can move on from Trubisky because we really don't want to be stuck in that rut because, if we pick up those couple games that, possibly Trubisky could have put us over the edge, this team's comfortably in a wild card position, but still, we would know that this team is not, really good enough to mix it up with the top teams, that they're not really truly a team that could go out there, that at least that we'd think they could win the Super Bowl. But, maybe Mitch plays the whole season and, they're pretty comfortably in a playoff position. But, I think that's really what the ceiling is for this team, honestly.
Well, here's the thing. If we win next week's game, we're probably in the playoffs. I mean, that's weird to think about because the Vikings currently hold that 7th spot, and we are, what are we, tied with them now? Or are we 1 game down?
So we're technically half a game because I think they're 6-6 currently, and the Bears are 6-7. So They technically have the advantage because they have the less loss, but,
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm not exactly sure. So we technically would then be taking the spot then.
If the Bears won against the Vikings, then they would drop to the same record. Or, well, potentially. I mean, who knows? Because they still technically would have a game in hand. But yeah, if the Bears won that game, then they would definitely strip them of that position.
That's really interesting to think about. And honestly, I do still hope that we lose that game because I think that the best thing still is getting good draft position. But at the same time, I do believe that winning this game, when we talked about on the predictions pod, we were talking about how, really this needs to be a focus of draft position. This needs to be, we hope that we don't win any more games. And as I was thinking over that a little bit, it's kind of one of those situations where we're going to have kind of a mediocre pick no matter what. Like, unfortunately, we're not going to be in top contention for one of these really high picks, and moving up is always still an option. And if we want to get a really good quarterback like Trey Lance, or God, I mean, if Justin Fields falls, that's going to be a miracle, but I doubt that happens. We're going to need to trade up regardless. So I almost feel like the added benefit of some optimism around this team going into the offseason for free agents. And, I mean, if Dak Prescott somehow gets free from, the Cowboys, I think that's huge. Or let's say even Matthew Stafford from the Lions, even Matt Ryan from the Falcons. I think that you still need to show enough that you look like an enticing free agent option, And I think really the best thing for this Bears team is probably to, if there is a really good quarterback that, comes available, which I would consider Matthew Stafford a good enough quarterback where it's like, hey, we don't need to blow this thing up. We can really just kind of roll with it again, bring in some more talent now that we have this quarterback. And while that is kind of the same message that Nick Foles was sold to us, and we talked about that earlier, I mean, obviously, like, Dak Prescott is a much different type of situation. And the reason why, truthfully, I think this is getting kind of, away from what we're talking about, but the reason why I think Dak Prescott or Matthew Stafford would be the best case scenario is that it turns it from hoping that you solve this quarterback position all the time, like hoping that you solved it, to, hey, we have a solution. And that's what I think. Just, we don't need to have the top quarterback in the league. The Bears do not need to have the best quarterback in the NFL. We just need a quarterback. Okay. And while I'm not saying that we should settle, having that quarterback position settled would be such an astronomically large step forward than what we've ever had. And I think that would be ultimately beneficial.
I know exactly what you mean, and I agree that they don't need the best quarterback in the league. I'd say maybe they don't even need a top 5, but they definitely need a solid top 10 quarterback, I think, to really mix it up, I think. And it'd honestly be so nice, though, to have a top 5 quarterback, to have one of those elite names, because it's just such sustainable success. I mean, maybe you have a couple off years where, you sputter a bit, but that's not going to be like, sustained drought, of not making it to the playoffs, of not really being a contender. I think that Stafford would be good enough if everything clicked like this defense looked today, and they were able to sustain that for, a season, especially, Stafford at the helm. That would work for sure. I mean, they could definitely make that work. It's just the better talent. And I mean, I'm not telling you anything new here. I mean, you would already know this because it's pretty obvious, but the more talent you have at that quarterback position, just the easier it makes it on everything else. I mean, you can pull out games that you didn't deserve to win at all. And that's the best part. So it'd be really nice for the Bears to have that luxury, but I do agree with your sentiment that, yeah, I mean, you take a Matt Ryan, a Matt Stafford, I mean, and put them there. But then once again, the issue that pops up is we lose that, mobility, which, with the state offensive line, they played a bit better, but they're still vulnerable to blitzes. And, with primarily stationary quarterbacks like Stafford and Matt Ryan, we'd see a lot of the same issues that, we saw with Foles. Maybe not to the same degree, but, we'd still see it.
I think I think Ryan, we would see a lot of the same issues as we saw with Foles, but really I think Stafford is like mobile enough that he can extend plays. He's not going to get you some of the yards that Trubisky gets you, but I feel like he's mobile enough where he can buy you some extra time, unlike, Nick Foles, who really is a statue in the pocket. But let's go ahead and let's get back into the actual game. I know it's hard to review the actual games. We talk about it all the time because while there is differences in this game that led to us winning, the state of the Bears is still exactly the same. And I mean, if we make the playoffs, if we don't, it doesn't really change what needs to be done this offseason. I mean, just some notes that I had. Roquan Smith has played absolutely fantastic, and he is validating that pick time after time again for his position. I mean, I think he had 2 sacks today. I mean, just whenever he hits someone, you see it on the TV. I mean, I just remember one, I can't remember which running back it was, but he just slammed him to the ground and then he got to Watson a couple times. And then another guy that I want to give kind of a shout out to is Bilal Nichols, man. I didn't even realize how much weight this man has put on, because I remember when he came out of college, his frame looked a little lacking as far as like a nose tackle. In a 3-4 defense at least, which, I mean, you see Eddie Goldman, who's just gigantic, right? But Bilal Nichols looks huge now, and he is absolutely dominating. As soon as we get Eddie Goldman back and we can throw him back into that defensive end position, him, Eddie Goldman, and Akeem Hicks, that's going to be a monster line next year, assuming that all those guys come back.
Yeah, and also, I mean, Mario Edwards, too, also picked up 2
right?
sacks. And honestly, that defense was just playing so much faster out there today. I mean, in comparison to what we saw in probably the past 2 weeks, Roquan Smith played a lot more instinctively, and it paid off. And I think it really kind of set the trend for the rest of the defense. Mack took Tunsil to work pretty much all day. He was physical, of course, and you wouldn't expect anything less. And really, I mean, that front seven dominated today. I mean, it really changed. It really set the pace set the tone for the whole game. I mean, I think the Bears always felt that they were really comfortable and in control because they developed a good lead. And then, by the time they were midway through the third quarter, the Texans hadn't chipped into it at all. And they knew that they could really, keep running the ball because this was their best. I don't know if it was yards wise, but like effectiveness, this was one of their best running games all season.
Oh yeah,
as far as just being able to sustain drives and keep the clock running. So yeah, I mean, the Bears actually, it seemed like they played a fluid. It seems like they actually had a thorough game plan on this one that they could execute, and it was really the first time that we saw it this season, and it was, good to finally see Montgomery able to break off a big explosive run, to have an explosive play. I mean, it's just something that was lacking from the offense. It'd be great if we could get, some more of that through the air. But, I mean, right now as, Bears fans, we have to take whatever we can get on the offense. So it was good to see, Montgomery, play that explosive way. I don't know why we kept, Ryan Nall in the game so much, though. And there was a couple times he missed some very obvious pass blocks on blitz packages, and he just was not reading
right at the end, what was it, a corner blitz or a safety blitz? Something happened, and he was just in there for pass protection and just completely whiffed on him.
Yeah, I think he went to go chip on the tackle and to do a little double team, and he completely missed the whatever. I think it was the inside linebacker that was blitzing, or maybe it was a corner. It was either two. It could be a nickel or like an inside linebacker.
Which isn't his first assignment, by the way. His first assignment is to pick up any sort of creative blitz package, and then his second assignment is to go ahead and help chip with a edge rusher. But he definitely should have saw that coming. That was a complete blow on him. But it is what it is at that point. Ryan Nall, I mean, obviously he's I don't want to call him a practice squad player because he has been elevated for quite a bit, but he's not someone who's going to be a primary rotational back for many NFL teams. And then one other thing that I really noticed was Sam Musford and Bars. They've been doing a pretty good job, man. They've been doing a pretty good job. While I don't think that they should be our starters by any means, I do think that they are going to be quality rotational pieces for this defense going forward. And it might actually give them the comfortability with, as soon as James Daniels gets back, for them to feel like that interior offensive line is strong enough that they can go ahead and focus on, maybe their tackle positions, which is really what I think they need to focus on. While at the same time, Ifedi, he's been kind of up and down this season. He's been doing a decent job at that right tackle position, where he's playing right now, due to injuries. I do think that, we should maybe switch him out this offseason, but it doesn't. I feel like the biggest priority needs to be a focus on those tackle positions, personally.
Yeah, I think definitely it's the exterior of the line. The interior of the line, seems to be doing pretty good, especially, developing run blocking over this past couple of weeks. It has definitely improved. Pass blocking can still improve a bit, but yeah, it seems like, if a lot of the pressure comes, either in that, completely from the outside around the tackle or, in the gap between the guard and the tackle. So, yeah, I think, Leno has he's left a lot to be desired in recent weeks, honestly.
He needs to be thrown over to that right tackle position, and we just need to draft a new left tackle. Especially if we can get a quarterback in free agency, like we were kind of talking about, that would be huge. If you could just, I know Leno's contract is not as, it's not as like, it's not as easily movable as someone like Bobby Massey. So go ahead, get rid of Massey, swap Leno over to right tackle, and go ahead and get an actually quality left tackle. And I think that is going to be just a substantial upgrade on this line. I'm going to be honest. I think that Mustipher, I really like how they put him at center and then flipped Whitehair over to guard. I think that has been working out perfectly. And I almost think that it would be best if they just went with Cody Whitehair at guard next year and James Daniels at guard 2, and then just kept Mustipher as the center, because he has looked completely fine. I mean, he doesn't let up much at all.
You'd think that'd be a very solid interior too, because from what we've seen from Daniel, it's been pretty good. Especially in games against pretty like notable opponents. Of course, his performance in that Monday Night Football game against the Rams, I think, was one that jumps out. And of course, that was in 2018. But he's always done a decent job. His biggest critique is he's undersized, so sometimes he gets pushed around a little bit. But I'd feel that overall that'd be a pretty solid interior, and it would just having that offensive line solidified is really, I mean, of course the quarterback position needs to be too, but those two in tandem, you get those fixed. And even if they can't make a massive improvement in quarterback, say we get someone like Darnold, say we get, insert whatever possible free agent quarterback name, or, whatever person we can draft, whatever it's going to be, whoever's starting at quarterback, you give them a better offensive line. I mean, you figure this offense in general just is going to have to look better. There's been lapses in play calling, but honestly, with a good offensive line, even sometimes, that can bail you out of bad play calls too.
Definitely. Honestly. No, definitely. I agree with that. And I think we saw that when we saw that Mitch step in and that added mobility factor, and then also, that switch to Mustipher at center. I do think that if we do replace someone on the offensive line, it should be Mustipher and then let Ifedi walk. I do really like both James Daniels and Cody Whitehair at guard. I think that those are where they play best at, and I think that we should either get a traditional center or just keep Mustipher and let Ifedi walk, because he has not performed all that greatly. While he has been a step up over some of the other players that could be playing that guard position, I don't think he should stay with the team per se. And then outside of that, just a couple other quick notes. I still think that we're going to need to go ahead and switch out Chuck Pagano at defensive coordinator. There's some major questionable calls on third downs. I saw one third down where they just had almost their entire rotational pieces in on third down, and they were rushing like 3 guys. And that just, when you see stuff like that and you give Deshaun Watson time, he's able to pick up quite a bit. He's a good quarterback. But he was able to really, I know he had a better game today, Chuck Pagano, as far as calling goes, but still, I believe that we do need to make that switch. And then one last thing, man, Allen Robinson, while he did have a couple good catches, he missed an absolute perfect, a fine pass by Mitch Trubisky today. He totally had to go up and grab, completely whiffed on it. And then he also dropped a couple key third down passes. And while, Robinson is our best wide receiver, it's like, when you pay him a wide receiver $18-19 million, they're not supposed to do that. And I think it's becoming more and more evident that Robinson's time here in Chicago is probably going to be coming to an end. And, while ideally in a perfect world, I would like to keep him, this team has a lot of other needs that are a lot more critical than that wide receiver position.
Yeah. I feel the same way, because it seems like he's always able to kind of like pad the stats. Like, he was north of 100 yards, hit that 1,000-yard receiving mark, got the touchdown, right? And, he made that good catch in traffic in the end zone, or hanging on to it after he got pushed by Hargreaves, I think. But, right, it always seems like kind of in critical situations, he's like a 50-50 guy, on that third down, that third down conversion that you need. He might not get it. That jump ball, he might not get it. And it's like, yeah, you expect someone that you're going to be shelling out money for to be reliable. And it's really become an issue, especially like in this latter half of the season. It seems like you're at least going to get like a drop or two a game from Allen Robinson. And it's not something good that you like, want to expect.
And maybe it's not even showing up in the stats book as a drop, but just like a missed opportunity that you're like, how did, like, if you want to pay this guy top wide receiver money, you expect him to make this. I mean, I don't want to bring it back to this comparison all the time, but like guys like Devontae Adams or DeAndre Hopkins, when the camera's on them and when the team needs them, they come up with massive plays. And I feel like we've never seen that out of Allen Robinson's tenure here in Chicago. I think he's a great person. I think that he has been great for this team. He's been one of the few bright spots on this offense. He deserves to get money somewhere, but I don't know if the marriage between him and the Chicago Bears is necessarily the best thing going forward.
Yeah, it's interesting because I like, in general, I like the receivers that we have, on this Bears team. And, Mooney is definitely someone that I want to see kept around. And I've always liked Anthony Miller, but, this year he's kind of been on and off, hot and cold. So, I haven't been feeling so great about like what his potential can be. And, Allen Robinson has been good and pretty steady, but not perfect. And, for the contract that, he's going to want, I'm not sure if he's really worth it. So it's kind of like, I like where our receiving core is at, but at the same time, if we lose a lot of them, I'm kind of okay with starting fresh and trying to get kind of a new room here that's a little more dynamic. Because I still kind of feel the way that this, no one on this Bears receiving core, other than, Mooney, can really, open up the field, can really be that much of a threat vertically. And it really seems like Miller should really be that, but, sometimes he is and sometimes he isn't.
It's just kind of up and down for him. And I don't really know exactly what it is. Maybe we do just need a better quarterback and he'll show out and be more consistent. But yeah, he's definitely lacking consistency. I mean, sometimes he's just absolutely balling out. And then sometimes he just, goes away for a couple of games. It's really difficult to see, truthfully. Some other positive news, Cairo Santos set the Bears record for most consecutive field goals made, and he's currently kicking the best field goal percentage of any Bears kicker ever. So, I mean, on a bright side of this season, that is good. That is good. He's definitely going to probably be here for a while. We're probably going to give him a pretty big contract, I can imagine, this offseason.
Yeah, we finally solved the great kicker question from what, 2019? Like, my goodness.
Yeah. The only problem the Chicago Bears are known for, the kicker position, we have finally solved.
That seemed like that was basically like a curse because everyone was like, all this team needs now is a kicker, And then it was like everything unraveled from there.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And we're going to give him a big contract and then he's going to be doinking off of every single field goal next year. I can already see it. But one last little, nugget I want to get to before we go ahead and wrap this up. Actually, two things real quick. One, a lot gets to be made out of the Chicago Bears not drafting Deshaun Watson. I think we need to remember that Deshaun Watson probably equally wishes he was drafted by the Chicago Bears because, man, this team would be pretty fire with him, and that Texans team is just never helping him. Never doing any help for him. I mean, the man had collapse along after collapse along like a couple years ago. He gets absolutely mauled through today. Just no receivers to throw to. It is a tough life for Deshaun Watson, man. It is a tough life for him.
He got beat up, and I know that once the Bears got their fifth sack, they said that was back-to-back games where he's been sacked 5 times, and the Bears got to him more after that. I know at least 6 times. Not sure if they got any more than that, but. Yeah, I mean, he's been getting beat up, and they're searching for a new direction, that Texans
Hopkins
team.
Traded away.
Yeah, I mean, they're in an interesting position, and, they kind of had a little bit of, a streak, a hot streak, I guess you would say, at one point in the season, but for most of the time, they've been a pretty bad team, and, man, compared to the Bears, there it must be in a pretty rough position too. I know that they've been hit with injuries, a lot heavily, like especially at that wide receiver position, not having Will Fuller, but that gets to it too. I mean, with releasing Kenny Stills, they've made a lot of interesting decisions as far as who they want to keep on that team, and yeah, they're gonna have to decide what they want to do, and Yeah, I'm sure there's some truth to that Watson would like to be a Bear. I mean, at least you have the thought that it would be a franchise that would hopefully back him, and rally around him and hopefully be able to sustain some success. And it's a shame that the Texans, it seems like they're buying into him, but at the same time, they're doing everything to not help him. It's very odd.
You can say all you want about the Chicago Bears, but the one thing that they've always done is they've made sure to put Mitchell Trubisky, they put players around him that try to help him succeed. They went out, they got Allen Robinson, they brought in multiple different tight ends. They bring in, Khalil Mack on defense to make it so he doesn't have to score as much. It just seems like the Texans continuously are taking away, or were under Bill O'Brien, we're taking away from Watson and making it more difficult on him, putting More pressure on him as the quarterback. And just, as much as Nagy's, exactly, like torturing him. They go ahead and they trade away, I can't remember his name, but their tackle, and then they go ahead and get Laramie Tunsil for 2 first-round picks. And while then both of those tackles are putting up almost the exact same stats. So, I mean, they really, with draft capital, good players, they just completely deprived that team. And while Matt Nagy, we can criticize Matt Nagy all we want. He certainly was better than Bill O'Brien for the Texans. They're kind of in that, John Fox, I mean, even before John Fox for the Bears situation, like they have just been, while the Bears have been, we're not going to give the Bears any credit. The Texans have just been a rough team. And it seems like even when they make the playoffs, it's like one of those things where it's like, yeah, it's probably because you're in the AFC South type of situation, nothing too spectacular.
You knew they weren't going to make a run, basically. Yeah, you knew they weren't going to do anything.
You knew that if Deshaun Watson got injured, their season is just completely goes to crap. So, I mean, at the end of the day, it's tough as a Bears fan to see Deshaun Watson succeed so much. While I do hope for his success, and I think Deshaun Watson's a great person, great player too. It is rough to see what they put around him. And, maybe the Chicago Bears could take advantage and trade 4 first-round picks for him.
Oh, yeah. Another thing, probably one of the main knocks for Ryan Pace is how, I guess, loosely he uses draft capital. So that would definitely go over well.
Yeah, I'm sure. And then, so it's tough for Deshaun Watson. I feel bad for that man. And then I wanted to bring one other thing up. I'm trying to, Ian Rappaport came out this morning saying that Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace, both of their jobs are on the line, and they might have been fired after this game if they lost. And man, I guess we're gonna have to wait till the end of the season to see if that actually cements itself.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that was the response. I mean, they came out and, I got to give it to them. This was the best game that they played all season in my eyes. I think this is the best they've looked over the duration of a whole game, and it just came at a poor moment. I'm not really that, psyched up, that happy about it, but, I guess tomorrow's a victory Monday, and, you can feel a little less shameful wearing, your Bears gear and all that. At least the losing streak is over.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, do you want to just give a quick, do you think we're going to beat the Vikings next week or no?
You know what? I think it's going to be an interesting game. Just given, how the Vikings-Bears games work out. I mean, you figure they're at least going to be close because the Vikings always seem to play down to the Bears, even when the Bears are at their worst. So I think that it could be interesting. I don't want to say that the Bears are going to win the game because, they have, this game alone doesn't necessarily prove to me that they got everything figured out. But at the same time, I mean, I think there's a chance the Vikings come out and blow it and the Bears do just enough. The Bears do just enough to win.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I'm a little bit afraid of us potentially making the playoffs. Just not looking forward to it if it happens. I know that would be the second playoff berth in 3 years for Matt Nagy, but man, it just does not feel that way.
No, it doesn't. And it's just how the way things are shaking out. And you look at I was just looking at that chart when they put it up on the screen and saw those 3 wild card spots, and I was like, man, after they win this game, they're really on level terms with wins. I'm like, that really scares me, And the fact that they're playing one of the teams they need to get over in this next week, and they just played their best game of the season. It's like, oh, you're kidding me, you know?
Yeah, right. It's just things align in a funny way for us Bears fans. But yeah, guys, thank you so much for joining us. We're gonna be back at you guys on Thursday with a new podcast. I know we're also both working on some new YouTube videos we're going to be releasing shortly, kind of similar to the whole Zach Wilson situation where it is in this podcast format. It's more YouTube tailored content, so make sure to check that out. And bear down, guys. Be happy. Victory Monday. Maybe this win can be the convincing win that brings Dak Prescott to the Chicago Bears, or better yet, Aaron Rodgers. He breaks free. He forces a trade to the Chicago Bears, and we just beat up on the Packers for the next 5 years. But
we're dreaming.
Yeah.
We're dreaming over here, but bear down.
Yes. Bear down, guys. Bear down.